I never thought betrayal could have a taste. But the night my own son sold the only thing I had left of my husband, I swear I could feel it on my tongue, bitter metallic like sucking on pennies. It happened in my kitchen, the one Frank and I had built together 40 years ago. The walls still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco, and the light over the sink flickered the way it always did when he used to tease me about calling an electrician. My hands were wet from the dishes, Frank's old coffee mug trembling in my grip when Mike walked in, arms folded like a conquering hero. "Stop whining," he said. "It's already sold." I froze. My son, my own flesh and blood, delivered those words as if they meant nothing. He was talking about Frank's Rolex. The 1978 Submariner. Frank had saved 3 months of overtime to buy back when Mike was born. The watch Frank wore every single day of our marriage, except the day he died. That morning, the hospital handed it to me in a plastic bag with his wedding ring. It wasn't just a watch. It was Frank. It was us. "You sold your father's Rolex," my voice cracked. Mike shrugged, almost bored. "I needed money for our trip to Italy. Ashley's been planning it for months." Ashley. His wife. She looked up from her phone, then smirking with that brand of false sympathy she had mastered. "Dorothy, clinging to material possessions isn't healthy. Frank wouldn't want you living in the past." "Don't tell me what Frank would want. He's not your husband," I wanted to scream. But I bit my tongue. Because I knew she wasn't talking to me, not really. She was talking to the Rolex. To the inheritance she believed she was entitled to. "Which pawn shop?" I asked, quietly steadying myself against the counter. Mike checked his shiny new Apple Watch, the irony not lost on me. "Golden State Pawn. They gave me $800. Not bad for something that old." $800. For a Rolex worth at least $3,000, maybe more. For 43 years of marriage, for every morning I watched Frank wind it while his coffee brewed for the sound that tethered me to him when grief threatened to tear me away. I wanted to fall to my knees, but instead I whispered, "I'm going to get it back." "Good luck with that," Mike muttered as he walked out the door, Ashley's heels clicking behind him. She paused just long enough to toss her parting shot over her shoulder. "Dorothy, you really should consider therapy." The door slammed. The kitchen was silent again except for the ringing in my ears. But here's the thing. My son and his smug wife didn't know I was no helpless old woman. I had spent 40 years as a bank manager. I knew the difference between giving up and strategic planning. And I was done giving up. The next morning I drove to Golden State Pawn. The shop smelled like dust and regret. The man behind the counter had tattoos crawling up his arms, and the weary eyes of someone who had heard too many sob stories. "You hear about the Rolex?" he asked before I even opened my mouth. My stomach dropped. "How did you know?" "Your son warned me you might show up. Said you were having a hard time letting go." Letting go, as if grief were an object you could drop in the trash. "I'll buy it back," I said, pulling open my purse. "Whatever you need." He shook his head, uncomfortable. "It's already sold. Paid cash. No returns in this business." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Some stranger was walking around Chicago with Frank's watch on his wrist, and I'd never see it again. Because my son needed vacation money. But then the man his name tag read, Danny, leaned closer. "We did find something strange. Hidden compartment in the back. Real professional job. Jeweler must have done it years ago. Found this inside." He slid a small manila envelope across the counter. Inside was a folded slip of paper, yellowed with age in Frank's careful handwriting. "Dorothy's birthday, July 15th, 1955. The day I knew I'd marry her." And below it a series of numbers and letters, SS4457CH0815DS. I stared at the code, my hands trembling. In 43 years of marriage, Frank had never once mentioned a hidden compartment in his watch. Never once hinted at secrets tucked under the dial he wound each morning. Danny lowered his voice. "The guy who bought it. When I mentioned we'd found something inside, he got real interested. Asked if we'd opened it." A chill slid down my spine. Whoever bought Frank's Rolex hadn't just been looking for a collector's piece. They had been looking for this. For the secret Frank had hidden from even me. That night I sat at Frank's old desk, surrounded by decades of his meticulous records, tax returns, account statements, yellowing files that smelled like ink and dust. The code stared up at me from the slip of paper like it was daring me to understand. Frank had kept everything organized, every penny documented, but this was different. and the longer I stared at it, the more it nagged at me. Frank hadn't just left me a watch, he had left me a mystery. And maybe, just maybe, the truth about who my husband really was. The slip of paper sat in front of me like a living thing, daring me to look deeper. SS 44457 CH0815 DS. At first glance, it was nothing but a jumble, but I knew Frank. He wasn't careless. He was deliberate in everything he touched. If he had hidden this inside his watch for decades, it meant something. I pulled out the old tin box where I kept his letters, the ones he wrote me when he was on business trips, the ones I had reread so often that the folds were soft as cloth. I thought maybe the code was some kind of cipher, a lover's trick, a puzzle only we would know. But hours passed, the clock ticked past midnight, and all I had was a headache and the heavy ache of missing him. The next morning, I took the slip to Victor, our lawyer Frank's oldest friend. He had seen us through buying the house through Frank's will, even through the messy probate when Frank's brother tried to stake a claim. Victor was tall, stooped now with age, but his mind was sharp as ever. He adjusted his glasses and studied the paper. "Looks like a safety deposit box code," he murmured. SS could be 2nd Street, maybe the branch code. CH0815DS could be the box number with initials. My heart thudded. A safety deposit box. But Frank never told me. Victor gave me a small smile. "Maybe he wanted to protect you. Or maybe he thought he'd have time to tell you later." He placed the paper back in my hand. "You should check the main downtown branch. I'll make a call." By afternoon, I was standing in the marble lobby of a bank I had never visited before, clutching the slip like it was a ticket to see Frank again. The clerk looked at the code, tapped on her computer, and frowned. "Yes, ma'am, we do have a box under that number, but it hasn't been accessed since 1994. 1994. My stomach twisted. That was the year Frank told me he had to work late almost every night for 2 months straight. I thought it was overtime, but maybe it was something else. The clerk eyed me carefully. "Do you have the key?" I shook my head. My voice wavered as I asked, "Is there another way?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Technically, yes, but only with proof of death and notarized documents. It will take a court order." My knees nearly buckled. A court order meant time, money, paperwork, and if the man who bought Frank's Rolex had this code too, then I wasn't the only one chasing the truth. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment sounded like footsteps. Every shadow outside the curtain looked like someone watching. I thought of the stranger with Frank's watch on his wrist, how his eyes must have lit up when he realized there was a secret tucked inside. What did he want? Why was this box important? The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my door. My blood ran cold before I even touched it. Inside was a single photograph, me walking out of the bank yesterday afternoon. On the back, scrawled in thick black marker, were the words, "Stay away from the box." My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped it. Someone was watching me. Someone knew what I was after, and they wanted me to stop. I called Victor immediately. His voice was steady, but I heard the edge of concern. "This isn't just about a watch anymore. We'll file the paperwork. In the meantime, you need to be careful. Don't tell anyone else. Not even Mike." At the mention of my son, rage bubbled in my throat. Mike had set all this in motion. If he hadn't pawned that Rolex, I never would have known about the box. And yet a part of me wondered, was this Frank's plan all along, to hide the secret so well that only betrayal would uncover it? 2 weeks passed. 2 long, nerve-wracking weeks of waiting while Victor filed petitions, and I jumped at every knock on the door. Mike and Ashley posted photos from Italy on social media, wine glasses, clinking ocean views, their smiles stretched wide with the kind of carelessness only money can buy. My husband's memory had bought them sunsets. And here I was, drowning in shadows. Finally, the call came. "Dorothy, Victor said we have access. Meet me at the bank tomorrow at 9. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was anticipation. When morning came, I wore Frank's old cardigan draped around my shoulders like armor and walked into the bank with my chin high. The clerk led us into a steel vault where the walls were lined with boxes like drawers in a mausoleum. She slid one free, placed it on the table, and left us alone. My heart pounded as Victor fitted the key the bank had provided. The lock clicked open. Inside were two envelopes and a velvet pouch. My fingers shook as I opened the first envelope. It was a letter, Frank's handwriting again steady and deliberate. Dorothy, if you found this, it means I couldn't tell you in time. There are things I kept hidden, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you from the danger that comes with them. In the pouch, you'll find proof of what I mean. Please forgive me. I only ever wanted you safe. I looked at Victor, my throat too tight to speak. With trembling hands, I untied the pouch. Inside were stacks of bearer bonds, crisp despite their age. Dozens of them, more money than Frank's entire salary could have explained. Victor let out a low whistle. Dorothy, this isn't just savings, this is millions. I could barely breathe. My Frank, my steady, dependable Frank, had hidden a fortune from me. And now someone out there knew it existed too. Victor's breath fogged the cold air of the vault as we both stared at the bonds like they might detonate. I touched the edges with 2 fingers, afraid they would brand me. Millions, he'd said, as if the word could fit in a room this small. It couldn't. It pushed at the walls, at my ribs, at every memory I'd ever had of Frank bringing home grocery store roses and counting coupons at our kitchen table. There's a second envelope, I managed. My voice sounded like someone else's, thinner, older. Victor slid it toward me. Inside were photocopies, newspaper clippings from the early 90s, a ledger torn from a spiral notebook, and a creased Polaroid of Frank standing in front of a concrete mixer, arms slung around a foreman wearing a hard hat and a grin that looked borrowed. Victor skimmed the clippings. City contracts, Highway 41 overpass scandal, embezzlement case dismissed due to missing evidence. He tapped the ledger. Cash draws, initials beside each amount. RB, CH, DS. He looked at me. Dorothy, these initials match the code you found, CH0815DS. They're people. People Frank knew. My mouth had gone dry. I recognized one name in a clipping, R. Bishop, owner of Northern Aggregate and Paving, a company that had sponsored our church picnic once. Men in polos, wives in pearls. Community people. The article called Bishop a philanthropist. Victor shook his head slowly. Philanthropists don't misplace millions in bearer bonds. I forced myself to keep reading. The ledger's dates ran like train tracks through 1993 and 1994. Amounts in the tens and hundreds of thousands. Initials that repeated. In the margin, in Frank's neat block print. If anything happens to me, box SS44457. A shiver ran through me. Had he been writing to me even then, hidden between numbers? He kept this for leverage, Victor said quietly. Or protection. If Bishop and his men skimmed off public money and hid it in bonds, someone needed insurance. Frank must have been close enough to touch the fire. Close enough to burn, I whispered. We opened the velvet pouch again. Under the bonds lay a smaller key wrapped in tape. A post office box key. Frank hadn't hidden a fortune, he had hidden a map. Back in Victor's office, we spread everything on his desk. The blinds threw pale stripes over Frank's handwriting over numbers that turned my stomach. You think he was involved? I asked the question I'd been swallowing since we opened the box. It tasted like betrayal. Victor took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Frank was honest to a fault. But honest men who get too close to thieves learn to survive like thieves. He could have been a witness or a shield. He met my eyes. Or both. The thought of my steady, dependable husband slipping into shadows I never knew existed made the floor tilt beneath me. I remembered 1994, Mike's Little League games, my mother's hip surgery. Frank coming home late with concrete dust in the creases of his knuckles. He would kiss my head and say, "Just long days, Dot." Had I nodded and turned the page of my book while danger hung its coat in our hallway, Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then frowned. Unknown number. I'll let it go to voicemail. He set it aside and leaned in. We can move the bonds to a different institution, set up a trust, notify federal authorities discreetly. Discreetly, I couldn't keep the bite from my voice. Someone slipped a photo under my door, Victor. Discretion isn't our problem. Visibility is. He studied me for a heartbeat, then nodded. All right, we'll do both. By evening, my head pounded with logistics. I walked home past storefronts closing their metal grins, the city settling into its night noises. In my building's lobby, the ceiling light buzzed like an anxious thought. I could feel eyes even where there were none. When the elevator doors parted, I half expected a man with a borrowed grin to be waiting. Empty. Just the brass handrail catching my tired face in a smudge. I set a kettle on and took the photograph from my purse, the one of me leaving the bank. I flipped it over. Stay away from the box. I stared at the handwriting, trying to place the angle, the pressure. Was it a hand used to forms to signatures, or a hand used to holding a trowel? My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I remembered Danny's weary eyes in the pawn shop and answered. Hello? A pause, then a low voice. Mrs. Morales, Danny from Golden State Pawn. Relief and dread collided in my chest. Yes, he was back, Danny said. The buyer. Asked if I'd heard from you. I told him no, like you asked. He left a number. Said you'd be compensated if you brought him what was in the watch. The watch is gone, I said. Yeah, Danny exhaled, but he doesn't think so. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen with the kettle screaming and realized something chilling. The buyer had assumed I was ahead of him, that I'd found the compartment and its secret before anyone else touched the watch. He didn't know I was still catching up. Which meant I had a sliver of advantage, thin as a razor, dangerous if I slipped. Victor called then. Voicemail was from an old client at DOJ, he said. He owes me a favor. He can put you in touch with a retired agent who worked the highway case in '94. Name's Alvarez. Alvarez. The name landed like a bolt, locking into place. 30 minutes later, a woman's voice, low, precise, filled my living room speaker. Mrs. Morales, I remember Bishop. I remember the bonds. We never found them, and without them the case collapsed. If your husband had those bonds, he was either the bravest man on that site or the most terrified. Maybe both, I said. The kettle had gone quiet, but my pulse hadn't. She asked for scans. I sent photos of the ledger, the letter, the bonds. Silence. Then, these are real and dangerous. The initial DS belonged to a fixer, Dominic Sardo. He made people disappear from paperwork, sometimes from everywhere. If the buyer of that watch is connected to him, you cannot meet alone. I'm not hiding anymore, I said, and heard how much Frank had changed me. I sounded like someone who expected to be hunted and intended to be ready. We'll do it right, Alvarez replied. If he wants a meeting, we stage it. Public place, eyes on all exits, your lawyer present, your phone recording, and Dorothy. Her voice softened. Grief can make you brave. Don't let it make you careless. That night, I laid Frank's cardigan over the back of his chair and sat with the bonds between us like a third presence. I traced his letter until the loops blurred. I didn't know if he had been a hero or just a man flailing against a tide. I only knew he had chosen me over and over, even if it meant choosing secrets that would one day bruise my heart. The next morning, a text pinged from a blocked number. Coffee. 2 p.m., Union Station. Bring what was in the watch. Come alone. A second later, another ding, this one from Victor Alvarez, can set surveillance. Say yes. We'll be there unseen. I stared at the two messages, then at the old submariner's empty box on my shelf. Somewhere a stranger wound my husband's watch. Somewhere a past I didn't recognize was walking toward me. I typed yes, 2 p.m. Union Station. At 2 o'clock was a cathedral of echoes, heels, clicking announcements, bouncing off stone arches, the air thick with the smell of coffee and exhaust from idling buses outside. I'd dressed in Frank's cardigan, its frayed elbows my quiet armor, and carried a plain leather purse that held only my phone. Victor's number on speed dial, and the envelope of copies Alvarez had told me to bring. The originals stayed locked in her custody. I perched at a cafe table under the grand clock, my back straight though my heart knocked against my ribs. People streamed by, commuters, tourists, a violinist tugging a mournful tune from his strings. Anyone could have been watching. Anyone could have slipped the photograph under my door. At exactly 2:05, a man slid into the chair across from me without asking. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s, neat beard, tailored coat. The Rolex glinted on his wrist. Frank's Rolex, my husband's heartbeat ticking on a stranger's arm. You're Dorothy, he said. Not a question. His voice was smooth, practiced. And you're trespassing, I replied, nodding at the watch. He smiled faintly. Your son didn't appreciate its value. I do. He leaned forward. I want what was inside it. I forced myself to meet his eyes. And if I don't have it, the smile sharpened. Then I assume you'd prefer we don't involve others. His hand brushed his phone casual, but not casual at all. A signal to someone unseen. My stomach tightened, but I remembered Alvarez's voice, public place, eyes on exits. I trusted she was here somewhere watching. I know about Bishop, about the overpass. About Sardo, I said quietly. Frank kept the evidence. That's why you're really here. His jaw flicked just for a second, but I saw it. Then he leaned back, feigning amusement. You think you understand? But your husband was in deep. Those bonds, he stopped as if realizing he'd said too much. Just hand them over. We'll make you whole. Whole? I almost laughed. I buried a husband who carried this secret to his grave. You think money makes me whole? His eyes cooled. Everyone has a price. I opened my purse slowly and slid the envelope across the table. His fingers twitched as he snatched it, flipping it open. When he saw photocopies instead of bonds, the smoothness cracked. His eyes snapped up, fury flashing. These are copies, he hissed. Smart men don't bring originals to a pawnshop negotiation, I said. My voice trembled, but the words landed steady. And smarter men don't threaten widows in train stations. For a moment, the noise of the station swallowed us. Then his phone buzzed. He read the screen, cursed under his breath, and stood abruptly. This isn't over, he said, the words cold as steel. The Rolex caught the light as he turned and vanished into the crowd. I sat frozen, breath ragged. Then Alvarez appeared at my shoulder, trench coat blending into the tide of travelers. You did well, she murmured. He's not just a collector. He's a courier. Likely still tied to Sarto's network. And now he knows we're watching. Victor joined us outside, his face pale. That man is dangerous, Dorothy. He won't let go easily. I clutched Frank's cardigan tighter. Neither will I. Over the next week, Alvarez coordinated with her old contacts, feeding them the copies, the ledger, Frank's letter. Federal interest reignited like coals stirred back to flame. Bishop's name resurfaced. Old files reopened. I could almost hear Frank's voice in my ear. I left you safe, Dot. I left you what they couldn't bury. But safety was a fragile word. One evening I returned to find my apartment door ajar. The frame splintered. Inside drawers, yanked cushions, slashed files scattered. They'd been looking for the originals. My pulse thundered, but Alvarez's warning steadied me. Keep the real evidence hidden where even you can't stumble on it by accident. She had locked it in a federal safe the moment I handed it to her. The mess was ugly, but nothing was gone that mattered. I cleaned in silence, then brewed tea in Frank's mug, hands steadying on the porcelain he once held. They could tear through my home. They could wear his watch like a trophy. But they couldn't erase the truth now. It was too far out, too many eyes on it. Mike called that night, his voice dripping entitlement even across the ocean. Mom, did you really make a scene at Union Station? Ashley says you're losing it. Look, if this is about Dad's stupid watch. Don't, I snapped. My tone silenced him like a slammed door. You sold your father for $800 in a flight to Rome. You don't get to lecture me. He muttered something defensive, but I cut the line. My heart hurt, but it was the sharp, necessary pain of a wound being cleaned. Sometimes betrayal doesn't get mended, it just gets left behind. By the end of the month, Alvarez called. We've secured indictments. The courier's name is Laird. He's vanished, but not for long. And Dorothy, your husband's bonds are now government evidence. They'll be protected. His choice to hide them saved lives even if it cost him his peace. I pressed the phone to my chest, tears sliding unchecked. Frank had carried this weight alone, locked in his watch, pressed against his skin every day. He hadn't told me not to deceive, but to shield. And now, finally, his secret had seen daylight. Still at night, I dreamed of the Rolex ticking on a stranger's wrist, Frank's heartbeat stolen. I couldn't bring it back, but I could make sure his silence hadn't been wasted. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to forgive the man I loved for the truths he never shared. Spring came late that year. The snow clung to gutters like secrets refusing to melt, and I found myself standing by the window each morning watching the city breathe, wondering how many years Frank had done the same with his own private storm hidden under his sleeve. Alvarez called again in April. Dorothy, it's official. Bishop's associates are going down. The DOJ reopened the highway case. The bonds you delivered are the keystone. Without them, they had nothing. Her voice was steady, professional, but I heard something else too, relief. The kind that comes when ghosts are finally named. And the courier, I asked. Laird's disappeared overseas. But he's burned now, too visible. He'll never touch Chicago again. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt instead was a deep, quiet ache. Justice was coming, yes, but Frank wasn't here to see it. He wasn't here to explain why he had hidden a fortune in bonds, instead of telling me why he had carried a secret that kept me awake at night decades later. The Rolex was gone too. I never saw it again. Sometimes I closed my eyes and tried to hear its ticking the way I used to when Frank would fall asleep on the couch, his wrist against my cheek. That sound had been our metronome. Now silence filled the house. One afternoon, Mike finally came by. He didn't knock at first, just pushed the door, then froze when he saw the new reinforced locks. He hovered in the doorway, sheepish in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy who'd broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. "Mom," he began, I heard about Dad, about the money. The papers are saying his name. I didn't answer. I let him squirm, let him taste the silence he had forced on me when he sold that watch. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I corrected. My voice was tired but sharp. That was easier. He dropped his gaze, nodding. There were no excuses left between us. Maybe one day there would be forgiveness, but not today. After he left, I sat at Frank's desk, with his letter again tracing the loops of his handwriting until the tears blurred the ink. He had written, "I only ever wanted you safe." Safe. It was such a small word. But it had carried the weight of his silence, the reason for the secrets, the price of my confusion. Maybe he had been wrong to hide it from me. Maybe he had been right. Either way, he had carried that burden alone. And now at last I carried the truth with him. I decided then that I wouldn't let the Rolex, the bonds, or even Bishop's corruption be the last chapter of Frank's story. I donated part of the restitution money the government released to rebuild the local library he had loved, to fund scholarships in his name for kids who dreamed of being engineers like he once had. And every time I saw his name on those plaques, I thought, this is what he wanted. Not secrets, not fear, legacy. To those of you listening, I want to tell you this. Sometimes the people we love leave us with mysteries we may never fully solve. They make choices in the shadows, thinking they're sparing us when all we wanted was the truth. And when betrayal comes, not just from strangers but from family, the wound is deeper than we can imagine. But wounds can scar into strength. Grief can sharpen into clarity. And sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting or even winning, it's taking the pain and turning it into something that outlives the betrayal. My husband's watch is gone. My son's respect may never fully return. But I am still here. I am Dorothy, not a fool, not a pawn, not a widow to be pitied. I am a woman who carried the weight of silence and still found her voice. And if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or silenced, know this. You don't have to stay in the shadows. You can step forward. You can make the ending your own. If this story touched you, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And tell me in the comments, have you ever uncovered a secret that changed everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? I'd like to hear how you found your strength again.